Welcome, everyone. Today is Wednesday, September 20th. I almost said January. Well, it is a new year. We will be discussing the Jonathan Safran Foer, Here We Aren't So Quickly. And I can't wait to hear what everybody has to say about it. I know there's a lot. And we'll talk about if we're in person or on Zoom at the end. But and first I will share with you once people are still coming in. Let's see what I got here. So here is what Jonathan Safran Foer looks like. He's a nice looking man. Exactly. He and I'll tell you a little bit about him in one hot minute. And I will also share, we've done some books by Nicole Krauss, his ex-wife, and I feel like I've been psychoanalyzing.
We all have. For those of us that have been in short story class for a long time.
Yes, exactly.
Their divorce was well known, and we've read both of them, and it's kind of interesting now to read this.
Right. Anyway, he was born in 1977. He's an American novelist. He's known for his novels Everything is Illuminated, which became it became a movie. Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close also became a movie. Here I Am. Thank God that is not a movie. That is a long ass book, and there's like a full chapter on masturbation. I'm just, spoiler alert or trigger warning. And his nonfiction works, Eating Animals. And he also has a Haggadah out. As I said before, he was married to Nicole Krauss. And I feel that, hi, come on in. We have some people on and some people here.
But it's not really raining hard.
Yeah. Okay, good. Come sit here. I feel that we were talking about Jonathan Safran Foer, good-looking man. He was married to Nicole Krauss. So this story was written in 2010, and he got divorced, I think in 2010, if not 2012. He got divorced in 2014.
Right, which was 4 years after he wrote it.
Except that he had been separated the year before. So, it was published in 2010.
Right.
Anyway, I feel that both Jonathan Safran Foer and Nicole Krauss have, what's the word? People have lauded them and said, that Jonathan Safran Foer is the new Philip Roth, and that they get all these accolades when they're still very young. I mean, they've done some stuff. I mean, Philip Roth, I'm not, that's a whole nother story and session, but he was, very prodigious, and he wrote a lot. So I just wonder if those accolades coming too early were hard for them. Sandy.
I got an invitation from CJE that for tomorrow there's something with Nicole Krauss. I don't know.
I'll have to look.
I can forward it to you.
Yeah, forward it to me. Yeah.
Okay. And then if it's of interest, you can pass it to everybody else. Okay.
Will do. They have 2 children, and we'll get back to Jonathan Safran Foer and Nicole Krauss in a minute. But what did you think of the story? Izzy, and then Alice, then Judy. Wait, go Izzy.
I thought there was so much packed into it in 4 pages, literally 4 pages. There was like a whole novel. It was just, I thought it was unbelievable how much he packed into that.
Yeah.
And there were so many, his comments I thought were so clever and so relatable to me, maybe, and to everybody. I don't know all the things he said, but when I started reading it, my first thought was, this is about, at the end, they're gonna get divorced. That it's very clear that he's saying, you know, I do this, she does that, we don't like each other, it's just we clash. And then at the end, you get the feeling that they're all, you know, that they decided to go into old age and just, so I just thought there was so much packed into it. And I thought it was funny. I thought it was clever, just very, very clever. I enjoyed it a lot.
Alice, and then
Yeah.
Judy, then Ellen.
Okay, yeah, I agree with Izzy. And also, it just, some of the things he said, it just reminded me over the years that you often think that these little nothings, I don't know, it's just that, you know, that they bother you and maybe they shouldn't bother you. But that's life. You know, that's life. These things that people say or do, your spouse, your children, it's just like they get into you in a certain way. He just was so insightful in how people react to all these things that happen to us every single day.
Right. I kept thinking, we're reading this right before Yom Kippur, where if we've harmed anyone, we ask for forgiveness, and we're asking God, and it's interesting our reactions to how he wrote this. Okay, Judy, and then Ellen, Evie, Susan, Terry.
I agree. I think both of you are right. It is incredible how the little things in our life make up our life. But two things. One is he's 46 years old when he wrote this.
Wait, how old is he now?
46.
Okay, well, so
Oh,
so
then
he
it was
was
early.
36.
Right. How does he perceive old age at his age? That doesn't make any sense to me. That's just wrong. Well, not wrong. It's not true. It doesn't feel true. And
It doesn't feel true to us as being way older than 36.
That's correct. Okay, now the other thing is,
It's his truth.
my feeling is that short story authors care dramatically about every word they use. There's no extraneous words in a good short story. So I ask you, he refers, I was just joking most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Then he repeats that line on the next page. I was mostly just joking. So my question is, how much of this is joking and how much of this is true, is fact, is real? So, and maybe
Well,
we joke.
it's
Maybe
fiction.
we joke.
It's fiction.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
those are my feelings.
Ellen, Evie, Susan, Terry. Where's some? Right.
Well, as
Ellen-
I started to say before you started class, those of us that have been in short story class for a long time were well aware of the divorce. We had read, I don't know, I've been in a couple of book clubs, so I've read Nicole Krauss. I happen to like Nicole Krauss a lot.
the name of her,
something the world.
History of Love.
History of Love. That was History of the World. History of Love. And the first time I read him, I did not like him as much as Nicole Krauss, but that's just the thing. He's obviously a good writer. Had I not known, as soon as I started this and I knew they had been divorced, I was curious, and then I looked it up and realized this was 4 years before he got divorced, which is interesting because you would think,
3 because they were separated.
3 years they were separate. Okay, so he's writing as a writer you would think would do, maybe not publish it, but write about differences in their personalities and their approach to life. I'm reading a book called The Island of Missing Trees, which
I read that.
is a very unusual book, but points out how connected everything, including animals and plants, are to life. But it shows so much how total opposites can have a very loving relationship. And so I kind of was, because I'm in the middle of reading it, I was reading it with that filter in that. And it is brilliant. I go back to agreeing with Izzy, who just read it for what was on the page. I guess I was being a little bit more critical because of what I did know, but it's quite an analysis, I guess, is that. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Evie.
Yeah, I did not know his background and couldn't remember why his name did sound familiar.
Yeah.
When I first started to read it yesterday morning, which I read, full disclosure, right before I got your email, I thought, oh, did I read the wrong thing? So that's why. At that point, I did not like it, but my first thought was, when we read Torah, sometimes all the definitions of God are what God is not. And that first paragraph sort of reminded me of that.
Oh, yeah.
And
Mhm.
when I look back at it again, it was kind of back and forth when one was about him, one was about her or the other person, back and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It also reminded me so much about maybe 20 years ago, I was involved in some classes called, was very popular then, called The Artist's Way, where the morning, you do these morning pages of rambling 3 pages at a time, and then you had to do 3 pages, and just all the stuff that came out of your mouth or out of your heart or out of whatever, no, it was all just rambling. And I thought, gee, this is a very poetic way of doing that, which of course I did not do. But when I thought about it this morning, I realized that most of the, as I recall now, most of the statements were really observations as opposed to judgments. So I kind of like that, the fact that, you know, he was stating what he saw or what he observed, but I didn't feel that they were so much blame or judgment. So those are my 3 thoughts. So after the second reading, I liked it a little bit more.
Yeah. Susan.
Well, when I first started it, I also was not familiar with this author, but I thought, oh my God, what is this about? And it seemed to me like rambling, but then I really got into it, and I have to say I really liked it. I thought
Listen, if you want more rambling Jonathan Safran Foer, read Everything is Illuminated.
okay.
Super rambling.
But I have to say, to me, it was a very realistic story of a marriage. Because for any of us who have been married for very many years, over the course of, I mean, I was married for over 60 years. Well, my gosh, a lot happens in that length of time. And there's a lot of stuff you can pick at, and that you can pick on, and that you get picked on for. And that's being realistic. And I really liked it. I thought he did a great job. To me, it was just the story of a marriage.
Yeah. Beverly.
Yeah. Well, I came into this story not knowing anything about him or his wife or his divorce. So I was like a blank slate. And I started reading it and I was confused. But upon the second reading, the impression that I had was that it was like photography, that it was like this, you know, when a professional photographer snaps quickly every movement that a model makes till he gets the right shot. Well, this felt like that kind of photography to me, a snapshot of a life.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really brilliant. I liked it a lot.
Terry, I know you have to go, but you had your hand up before, and I meant to call on you.
I just really wanted to, in my mind, it was like stream of consciousness. Yeah. And I agree with Susan so much about when you're married a long time, and you know, the annoying things like leaving a little bit of jelly in the peanut butter jar, or you know, that was just an example. But I've actually heard his mother speak. Esther is her name.
Yes.
Because they have, I believe it's his brother has a child at the day school where my granddaughter attends. It's JCDS, Jewish Community
Here in
Day School,
Chicago?
I guess, in Boston.
Oh, in Boston, yeah.
And the brother lives in Brookline. I just looked him up, and I think it was one of his, or maybe 2 of his kids that are at the school. And his mother is an amazing writer, and she went on a trip to Eastern like finding her roots kind of a trip, I believe, in Eastern Europe, and took, I believe, his brother Joshua along. And then she found dirt in all the different places she visited, and she put it in jars all around the windowsills of her house. She's a very interesting woman.
Right.
So it was
That
very,
sounds like everything is illuminated.
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I just wanted to share a little bit of that. I'm so sorry I have to run. It's a great
Okay.
discussion. I
I'll
love the
send you-
story.
I'll send you the, Janet.
Bye, all.
Bye.
My comment in two parts.
Mhm.
First, not knowing about the divorce.
Yeah.
I felt very sorry for two people who had no animosity toward each other, but they were living independent lives. Like there was no connection. How do you have a marriage without connection? He didn't seem to be connected to his child. He was just going about life independently. Now that I know that he got divorced, that was their marriage. There were two people living together, not mad at each other, not screaming and fighting, but not connecting.
Yeah. Judy.
Well, to that point, on 337, we were learning to see each other's blindness. I Googled questions that I couldn't ask our doctor or you.
Yeah.
So, and that happens. There are times when you know your conversation is not going to be the most
Right.
productive.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
You were terrible in emergencies on 336. I mean,
Yeah.
But not, there wasn't the anger, the horrible. It's just yes, they're not connecting.
right. The not connecting.
Yeah.
For me, because I've known about him for so long, I just don't, and I like Nicole Krause's writing. I know it's his wife, but I find his writing very disjointed and this stream of consciousness, even in his books. And she has one book, Forest Park, I think I'll have to Google it, which is her answer to the divorce. So I just feel that they've kind of, right. I feel that they've just like laid their souls out. And sometimes it's just uncomfortable. Like I cringe. I mean, some of these things make you cringe, that they notice these little things. Evie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a question because I'm confused. Was there some kind of a loss? The Googling, the doctor stuff, I just didn't.
I don't know.
Okay. I didn't know if I had something in there, but it just.
It's I find it a little hard to follow. Merle, Alice, Joyce.
Okay, I think when couples go through any kind of therapy, one of the things they're told is that communication is so important. And he writes, I was never complaining because confrontation was death to me, and because everything was always pretty much okay with me. So he was never really sincere with her. He never really expressed his true feelings, which right away is very bad in a relationship. And the other comment he made that I thought was very important was he said, isn't it funny that if God were to reveal and explain himself with a capital H, the majority of the world would necessarily be disappointed. And so he's coming into this marriage not expressing his true feelings and generally feeling disappointed. So you can see it's a failing marriage. But I thought he had all the high points. And also he had said something about his wife tended to remember slights from years and years ago, which I think women do that, whereas men will say, I don't even remember when that happened.
Right.
It seemed to be a very honest portrayal of how a marriage fails.
Yeah. Alice and then Joyce.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I tend to agree more with Susan than Merle. I don't know if it was all about a failing marriage. I think to me, it was more like life and yes, he's a lot younger than all of us. And he was a lot younger when he wrote this
Yeah,
story.
yeah.
But he was looking back. He was looking back at their marriage, which, yes, it did fail. But I think there were a lot of very tender moments. And also, I'm not sure the name of the woman who's also there. I'm sorry, I can't remember. No,
Janice?
next to Judy.
Yeah.
What?
Janet.
Yeah, I don't feel like it was all negative and not connecting. I mean, when he talks about, we left handprints in a moss garden in Kyoto and got each other off under a towel in Jaffa. We
Yeah.
braved my parents for Thanksgiving and yours for the rest. I mean, to me, it was so, I don't know. To me, it was very revealing, and just, he poured out his heart.
Yes.
And again, yes, their marriage did end up failing, but I don't think it's about a failing marriage. I think it's more how all of us go through life, and if we are married, how we try to connect, and sometimes we're connected and sometimes things drive us nuts. And I mean, I think about it all the time. I mean, how much I love my husband and all the wonderful things he does for me and for our family. And then sometimes it's like, what? You did that? I mean, I just think that's life.
It is.
I mean, that's life.
I say to my husband, what did I do before Google? Because he always thinks he has it right. And so now he says, he goes, I know. He says, yeah, it's not a full day unless I've made you Google something. Anyway, Joy, then Judy.
In a marriage, it's, when a marriage fails, it's not always the big things. It's the accumulation of the little things.
Yeah.
And I think this is a listing of the little things, both good and bad. And it's what do you mean you put the milk on the second shelf in the refrigerator? Don't you remember it belongs on the first shelf kind of thing? And it's those picayune little things that over time can
Drive you nuts.
build and drive a person nuts. And I think the almost lists that he had in the story were a combination of both.
Yeah.
Of the good and the bad. And there were, as Alice said, there were some very tender things.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a marriage is all about. It can't be all good.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unrealistic.
Agreed. It's Judy, Susan, and then Janice. Elaine. I saw Elaine, you had your hand up.
I really do agree with Alice's interpretation. And the reason, and if you look at the last paragraph, he says, I changed, and with more time, I will change more. And that's really where we all are.
Right.
So it becomes somewhat universal. And I think it's somewhat positive. I don't see it as negative. I think it points out the things that we find that are negative, but I think it's a very positive story.
Okay. Elaine, did you have your hand up?
All right, if we did not Google him and did not know that he was divorced, would we view the story differently? Probably, that this is an ongoing marriage. So I think sometimes you just read something for its worth. And it's interesting, if we didn't know, if there wasn't Google and we didn't know everything about their lives, would the story sound totally different? It would just be a life, like everyone says, of a marriage. But now we're putting 2 and 2 together and making 22.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, Susan, it's Susan, Janice, Ellen, Merle, and then Evie.
Okay, so as I said before, I did not know about him or his wife. I had no idea they were divorced. But now that I do know that, and I'm looking back at this, I'm thinking he was 36 years old, you said, when he wrote this.
Yeah.
It was before he got divorced. And he has been living in an era where divorce seems to be more and more common.
Yeah.
When I got married, I mean, divorce wasn't anything. You never got married thinking, well, if I'm not happy, I can always get out of it. You think to yourself, you know, for better or worse, I'm going to deal with whatever I have to deal with.
Yeah.
And so it's a whole different, you know, attitude that some of us come away with. I mean, I can't say that in my marriage, I never felt troubled. One time I thought to myself, what did I ever marry him for? And then I thought to myself, get back there, get back to why did you marry him?
Yeah.
And make yourself go back there.
Yeah.
And you do, and you make it last.
Right. I think this group could give him a lot of advice.
Right. I mean, it just, anyway, I still think it was positive, and as Elaine said, if you didn't know that he was divorced, which I didn't, I looked at it as the story of a marriage.
Yeah.
And being very realistic.
Yeah. Agreed. Janice.
One line here. We had sex to have orgasms.
Yeah.
Not to love each other, not to hold each other, not to connect with each other.
Not to have
for
children.
Purpose.
Procreate.
Yeah. And I'll tell you something. He was young, and this outlook is young. As we our age, you stick things out. It doesn't seem like a horrible marriage. There's no one's beating anybody. They're intellectual. They have money. You know what? It's the attitude of not sticking to something. You married this person for a reason. Quick to get divorced. I don't
Yeah,
why he had to be divorced.
Here we go. I was discussing millennials yesterday, and I said, I'm a boomer and I've been in this job over 36 years. Yes, we merged, but it's basically the same job. And my millennial children have been 2, 3, 4 jobs. I mean, and I listen, I only have one millennial who's married, and I hope that's forever, and let them change their jobs and not their marriage. But it is, it's a different generation. Okay, Ellen.
Yes, it's a different generation, but even as a different generation, I think I was so preoccupied with the fact that I knew he had gotten divorced, and I wanted to know what time it was in there. But now that I've had a lot of time to think about it, I think we would all benefit. I mean, I'm not particularly a writer, but we would all benefit, even if only for ourselves, even if we didn't share it with our spouse. I'm not sure we should share it with the world, but sharing it with our spouse might be something productive. And I think we'd all benefit from that kind of comprehensive analysis. And then if you're good communicators, obviously a lot of good could come from it in terms of give and take. I think we're all different. This book that I was mentioning is, shows you how opposites often attract. So if you see the opposite traits, in a marriage, and you try to understand them and then make the most positive out of them, those are all good things. But now it's kind of motivated me to sit down maybe and jot some things down.
Say something. All right. I have Merle, Abby, Izzy, Sandy, Judy.
Okay, I really see this as a negative story. And one of the reasons is because he says, I was so paranoid about kind words. And at first I wasn't sure, is that about receiving kind words or giving kind words? But then he says, I was terrible about acknowledging anyone else's efforts. And that is such a bad thing in a marriage. You have to be able to thank your spouse for the kind things they do. In fact, I heard that the most important words in a marriage are not I love you, but thank you. And he doesn't do it, so he probably doesn't thank her for cooking and shopping and doing the laundry and all the
I
things.
thought you were going to say the most important words are "I'm sorry."
Oh, no. Now, what I heard is that's good too, but I heard that thank you is very important. And according to this, he doesn't. And he says he's not neurotic, but he's apocalyptic. So that means anytime something bad happens, he probably just goes all haywire and crazy.
Right.
So I saw it as a negative story, and I'm sorry, I don't agree with the people who thought it was just a life.
Well, we still have 30 minutes. Abby.
Yeah, I was just thinking about a quote that I for some of you don't know, but I collect a lot of quotes. But one of the things that I found meaningful, maybe because I'm so busy interpreting and reinterpreting it, and it gets me into trouble together with my sensitivities. And the quote is, "Everything is meaningless until we make something of it." So here I saw this as a lot of observations as opposed to judgment. So that's what I kind of did like about it.
Yeah.
Because I was trying so hard not to.
Right.
Big deal out of comments.
Thank you. Izzy.
Oh, I thought there was so many, I mean, the observations were great and I could relate to many of them, but he went back and forth between saying all the bad things and all the good things. And some of the things he said to me didn't make sense at all. Sharing our happiness diminished your happiness. That's really not a positive statement. I kind of underlined all the things that were negative. There were many more positives than negatives, but I should have forgiven you for all that wasn't your fault. These are all the negatives. Then he says we were all doing well. It's just so contradictory. I think he's just mixed up in his mind of what he wants to do, or he's kind of weigh himself. It's like putting two things on a scale. The reason I should stay, reason I should go. Good things of our marriage, bad things of our marriage. And I think it was a great analysis. But I have always never been here.
Yeah.
I've always never been here. So he's really looking at himself consciously, probably going through psychoanalysis or something at the same time. Maybe the doctor said, please, write all the things that whatever. But then at the end it says, be beside me somewhere on the split stools of this bar by the edge of this cliff and the seats of the borrowed chair. So at the end, it's very positive.
What?
I don't know. Anyway, I thought it was just clever, and I could relate to a lot of the things that he was saying. I think everybody could. I thought it was great.
I wanted to.
I have to go in 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, you'll listen to the end of the recording. Welcome, Beverly Rose. And Sandy, go ahead. And I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead. Right. There you go.
I just have three things to say, and then I'm going to have to leave too. But I agree with Merle, and I really did not enjoy this story. I was just grateful that it was only 4 pages. The second thing is I'm about to celebrate my 67th anniversary.
Oh,
and thank you. And I could relate to a lot of the stuff. And number 3, of all of us, because I don't know all of you well, but I have to say, Susan Wellick, you had the most wonderful husband. He was so handsome, so successful, so kind, and I'll never forget him. So thank you, Susan.
That's so nice.
Very nice.
Thank you, Sandy. That was really sweet.
Yeah.
I agree.
We agree. I agree too.
And Susan, go ahead. And then I have Merle and
I have a question.
Oh, Judy, right.
I think we have to remember this is a story.
Yes.
Right. Why are so many figuring that this is about his marriage? It may have nothing to do at all with his marriage. He is a novelist, and he is a writer, and he is making up a story.
Right.
So I don't think any of us should jump to the conclusion, because he's divorced, that he was writing about his marriage. He may not be, and probably isn't.
Well,
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I'd love to
I-
ask him about it.
I
He
don't,
would say.
but I just think it's something we need to keep in our minds.
Yes, it
That
is.
it's
It's
a
fiction.
story.
It's
Right.
fiction. Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to
Yes.
respond.
Merle and Elaine.
I was just going to respond quickly to Ellen's comment. When I was in high school and we read Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, our teacher made us do Stream of Consciousness, and we had to write a 10-page Stream of Consciousness.
That would be
Try it.
painful. Painful.
Try it.
Painful.
Yeah,
It's
hard.
it's close to impossible, and that was the point of what she was doing. But Stream of Consciousness is hard. So he had to spend a lot of time figuring this out.
Yeah.
If I could just say one thing, I want to say,
Sure.
Merle, when you said the most important things a person can say in a marriage is thank you. Well, as long as Sandy brought up my husband, I want you to know the last words I ever heard him say to me was thank you for taking such good care of me.
Oh,
Oh my goodness.
Sweet.
That's the last thing I ever heard him say.
wow.
So,
Very powerful.
uh-huh.
Merle and then Elaine.
Well, so much of the story is about emotions and feelings, but there is something that he closes the story with, and it's about the house that they bought a fixer-upper. And the last line of this story is, what would we even do with such a house? And I thought there was something so many people can relate to, that they'll buy this, oh, charming old house, it's a fixer-upper. And then they find years and years go by and they can't quite finish fixing up the house. And that can be stressful on a marriage too. So I think whether he was talking about his own marriage or just marriages he observed, he hit the points that people can relate to. And I thought it was a great story in that way, but I saw it as a negative story. And this thing about the fixer-upper house, I have a fixer-upper house and I will never finish fixing up but every project you do, you feel, oh, this is great. I could check another thing off the list. But this idea that he wanted a sense of completion and wholeness that he might never get. And so that's kind of how he ends the story. And maybe that's how he felt about his marriage. It could never be fixed up. It could never be whole.
Yeah, unfortunately, because he's so famous, I went down a rabbit hole again. And I've gone down the rabbit hole with him before, but they had a house together in Park Slope and just sold it for $14.5 million.
Oh, so it's not a fixer-upper.
Oh, I know this is a novel, and if he wasn't that famous, I wouldn't be able to find that.
Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, Elaine, go ahead.
Okay, I disagree with writing out a list of positives and negatives. Maybe you could do it for yourself, but to share it with your spouse, I think is very, very dangerous. I mean, men and women see things totally, totally different. And I think this group has definitely shown that. Okay, I think our husbands or any man would totally disagree, have 180-degree other opinion. So I discourage everyone from writing out a list of pros and cons.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, a running argument, not argument, but, and this is how my husband and I see things. He sees clutter and I see that the toilet's dirty. And he does not see that. And I don't know how he can't see that. And, but if there's one piece of paper that I've left out or one invitation, he's like, got to clean this up, clean this up, clean this up. And so when you have different, opinions about that, and it sounds a little bit like he did as well, on page 338, and here we are, it's the second paragraph. Here we aren't so quickly. I'm not 26. And you're not 60. So I'm not, I'm sure he thinks at 36, he's way older than he was at 26, but he's not 60. I'm not 45 or 83, not being hoisted onto the shoulders of anybody wading into NEC. I'm not learning chess. You're not losing your virginity. You're not stacking pebbles on gravestones.
Well,
I'm not being stolen from my resting mother's arms. Why didn't you lose your virginity to me? Why didn't we enter the intersection 1,000th of a second sooner and die instead of die laughing? Everything else happened. Why not the things that could have? I mean, I do think his writing is beautiful, and it makes you think about a lot of different things. Beverly Newsom.
Yeah, this was sort of said, but what I want to say is that while authors and artists are, and their lives are very interesting, they should not, in the initial reading or viewing or listening, be the thing that matters. A work of art, a story, has to stand on its own merit, regardless of what's going on in this instance, in that author's life.
Mm-hmm.
And so talking about his marriage and his divorce to me is not really that relevant to the writing. The writing was beautiful. The writing was insightful. The writing was this, as I started to say earlier, like a continual snapshot of a life and a lot of the things that go on in a life. I liked it a lot.
Mm-hmm. Here is
and
what
it was negative and positive.
Yeah.
It was a very realistic for
Right.
him, for the writer. And then, of course, his life is another issue that piles in and
Exactly.
maybe matters, but shouldn't be the standard by which we look at
I
this,
was
in
saying.
my opinion.
This is what a reviewer says. Many readers find this Jonathan Safran Foer story confusing because of its unconventional style. It comprises a series of short, seemingly random recollections and observations about a couple's past, often in the form of negative declarations. On the first read, the difference between the two people appears so vast that it is hard to see how they could remain happy together. Themes include the swift passing of time, personality growth as we age, understanding and accepting differences, and the development of a relationship from individuals, I and you, to a couple, we, and then a family, we and he. Here we aren't so quickly. So I think I thought that was a good review. Merle.
And as you said, Vanessa, it's about the passage of time. And I just want to relate this little anecdote. My husband and I went to Ann Arbor, Michigan last week for his fraternity reunion. And we had both gone to the University of Michigan and graduated in 1966. And there were some people from this fraternity that I had not seen since they were 20 years old. And now they were 78 or 80. There were also some people who were 90 coming to this wonderful reunion. There was a football game. And what I observed was that some of the young men from the fraternity stayed married to their girlfriend from college, from Michigan. You went to Michigan, didn't you, Vanessa, also?
I did.
Yeah, go blue. Okay. So these people were absolutely amazing. They had stayed married to their girlfriend from college. Like my husband and I had dated in college too and got engaged in college. And they stayed married for like 56 years. And then there were other people who were on their third wife already. So, I mean, this is what marriage is. I mean, so many people get divorced, and then the rare cases where they stay married for a long time. So I thought this story encompassed all those things because of the passage of time. And it was a great story. That's
Abby.
Okay, I'm just going to go back for a minute to what Beverly said, because my frustration with literature has always been, how much time do we try to interpret what the writer meant? And how do we hear that people, whether it's artists or writers or whatever, they talk about what they know, their experiences have to color what they're doing. So to make that separation, how much are we really interpreting and how much do we need to? How much do we really be more objective and kind of separate it out? I mean, I've always had that problem with poetry, thinking that maybe somebody just wanted things to rhyme. And so I've always had a certain impatience in terms of just really delving in and interpreting, which in this case, having the backstory made it a little bit more helpful for me to think I know what he was talking about, though I really don't. So there's just that unclear way of dealing with literature for me. So so what Beverly said kind of reignited that frustration that I've always had.
Okay, Alice.
Well, yeah, this goes to what Evie just said. Bob and I have taken a lot of classes at the at Northwestern University, and we took this philosophy of art class. And one of the things I think I remember is like, you know, any kind of art, whether it be literature or visual arts or music or anything, a lot of it is that there's lots of different interpretations that you can make. So there isn't just one, and look at, we're seeing this in our little book club reading a 4-page story now. I mean, you can look at, what do you bring to art? You bring your life experience, other art that you have experienced, other literature that you've read. So everybody's going to come up with something different. I just want to say one other thing. I've done some reading and also doing like meditation and stuff, and like I use this Calm app for sleeping, helping me sleep. And one of the things that I got out of it is gratitude. Gratitude is, you know, this goes to, you know, that thank you to other people, and also just, you know, in your own heart to have gratitude. That's like really such an important thing, to have peace, I guess. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I have one more thing to read to you. Jonathan Safran Foer's Here We Aren't So Quickly is a unique piece of writing that managed to describe an entire life in a matter of pages. We've talked about that. Rather than using strict ages, the passage of time is shown through important milestones in the narrator's life, such as marriages, deaths, and births. By examining these events, the reader can detect 3 distinct periods in his life: youth, middle age, and old age. There are subtle changes in the protagonist during each time period, which showcase his maturation and provide evidence of his character growth. The story begins with the narrator as a young individual, describing his ineptitude as certain social encounters and his quirks rather than any deep character flaw. He does not yet the maturity to recognize any severe deficits he may possess. The focus is solely on him, using only I. And then because when he was doing that, it and it switched to we,
Yeah.
I was even more confused. But if you look at it through this, you know, first he's a child, then middle age, then old age, you know, and as we get older, we can see more of the we. It's not just I. In his youth, the narrator is relatively carefree. He's in good health and focused on enjoying life. He begins the story concerned only for himself, and over time begins using we. The death of his father leads him towards middle age, and the birth of his son completes his transition. He longs for the days of his youth and has a regretful attitude. His son marries, and the narrator and his wife age further, and the transition into old age is complete with the death of the narrator's father-in-law. So that helped me a little bit. Looking in at the story and how that switched up. I look at all the authors that we read, and this one I happen to have read. You know, sometimes I've read them, and I'll talk a little bit about Nathan Englander, who we're reading next week, who I adore, but he's got some hard stories as well. I kept going through the rabbit hole with Jonathan Safran Foer, and he's been in, he's just too famous for his own good, I think. He's had, dust ups with Natalie Portman and different famous people he's dated, and like, we don't know. I'm trying to, Michener, that happened to be of my youth. I read all of Michener's books.
Right.
I don't know who he's married to, or I don't know all these things. And I think sometimes the internet, especially for me, because
Right.
it's so easy to go down the rabbit hole. And I'm trying to find, and maybe the guise of like, I do find these reviews and I share them with you, but
Helpful.
and they're helpful. But in between that, I see that he had a this and a that. And it's hard to, it's hard to
I
think
think if
about
his
that.
wife had written this,
Yeah.
there would have been more about the child.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
surprised.
Yeah. Yeah.
He spends, there are literally 2 paragraphs about the child, and they're not all about the child.
Yeah. Well, I find him in life and what he writes. This Here I Am that he wrote. Oh my God. It is just,
I have to look at
yeah, it's super, super long. And again, I believe suffers from not enough editing. I mean, it's like 700 pages. It's like, it's terribly long. And
No, thank you.
I think it's terribly narcissistic.
pages.
Elaine. And
Okay.
Elaine.
I have a funny story to tell you.
Okay.
Years ago, I belonged to a gym in the city, and I knew this man very well. He was in my classes. He was a nice man. At that time, all the men wore these shorts that were open. One day in the gym class, he inadvertently did a move and his genitals were exposed. That was what I thought of him for the rest of the time that he belonged to the gym. I had known him, and every time I saw him, I had a picture of his genital. And that is one of the things when we all go down the rabbit hole, interpret the stories, we're getting into everyone's genitals.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say that.
I think there's there's obviously truth in what you say, Elaine. That's your story and you're sticking to it. But yeah, it's yeah.
Okay.
Right. You always leave with the last, that's your last impression. I want to talk about going forward. Our next book club is Wednesday, October 4th. And this book is by this story is by Nathan Englander, and he has a fabulous short story book. And I think it's the name of it is the name of the title story is What We Talk About When We Talk About Anne Frank. And if you haven't read that short story, I read a lot of short stories, but that one will always stick with me. And some of his stuff, he's a little out there too, but
Could you repeat the name again?
I'll put it in I'll put it here.
It's
in the book, Beverly.
23 or chapter 20.
Beverly, just look on the bottom of the story.
Okay.
The first page.
That's the book. But the story for next week is Free Fruit for Young Widows. Yeah, it's right there, right.
the name of the story.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Right. It's right. That when we talk about Anne Frank, right. Okay.
But that's not the 27th, wait,
No, the 4th.
the 4th, right.
The 4th. So ladies, because we're all ladies, do we want to just meet in person? And if you have to come online, you come online. Do you want one online, one in person? What's your pleasure? Speak up. So you people all came. So in
I
person.
like coming. I really enjoyed seeing everyone last time.
Okay.
It was really nice. When the weather gets really horrible or something,
We could
we
right.
can revisit it.
Okay.
I'll come next time.
Okay. So let's just keep.
I liked it too.
All right, great. Let's keep them in person until the weather gets bad.
Okay.
And you'll love Free Fruit for Young Widows. I know it's a great story.
I will be in Eastern Europe October 4th. I will see you.
Oh,
I'm doing the trip the second time that you're doing.
Oh, very
it.
nice.
Yeah,
We'll have to
wonderful
talk.
trip.
All right. So the proper greeting at this time of year is Gamar Chatima Tova. May you be inscribed in the book of life. Or have an easy fast. Someone said to me, have an easy fast, like you're supposed to fast and mean it. And I was like, no, I need the easy fast. I take an Excedrin, so I have some caffeine. I mean, I do everything so that I don't have to.
Well, I hope my grandparents are not listening, but my
Right.
husband has to go to a very important doctor's
Yes,
appointment.
you go to the doctor's appointment.
Yeah. My
Absolutely.
grandparents are not listening.
Right. And if you need anything, you know where to get a hold of me.
Bye-bye.
See you in a
Bye-bye.
couple of weeks. Enjoy this weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.
You think.